I'm joined now by the co-host of Pod Save America, Jon Favreau. Favs, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here.
So we've seen that Donald Trump has been answering questions that he probably doesn't want to be answering right now as it relates to Epstein, but this came into particular focus, how bad this is for him in the last few days when he revealed that one of the women that was poached by Jeffrey Epstein was Virginia Giuffre. Now, the reason that this timeline doesn't work out is because he said that he understood that Jeffrey Epstein took her from the spa at Mar-a-Lago. She worked for the spa at Mar-a-Lago around 2000. We know that she was trafficked and abused by Jeffrey Epstein in 2001. And then Donald Trump gave a quote to New York Magazine in 2002 saying that he's been Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy, that he loves women almost as much as he does, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey loves his social life. And so in terms of the potency with his base, with these people who voted on him, focused on this idea that he's going to release these files, how damaging do you think that this is?
I mean, I don't know, but it's like there's not a lot of good explanations for the way the timeline works and what Donald Trump claims to have known and not known and said. Because there is a scenario where you could imagine Donald Trump said, I had no idea that it happened when it happened.
Right.
But then I found out through court filings much later that, it was an employee of mine, blah, blah. But the reason that can't be true is because Trump says that when it happened, he said to Epstein, don't poach my people.
Right.
And then said it again to him. So he is revealing that at the time he knew that he poached this girl when she was 16 years old. My question there is, one, why was Donald Trump involved in sort of the HR goings on at Mar-a-Lago? How did he know about this employee?
Random employee amid thousands, maybe at his spa in one property.
Was he under the false impression that Jeffrey Epstein operated a competing spa and that he was hiring this girl for that?
Yeah.
Did he not think it was weird that Jeffrey Epstein was hiring a 16-year-old girl to be his personal masseuse, and then told him to knock it off? It's unbelievable. So, at the very least, best case scenario, Donald Trump knew that Jeffrey Epstein hired a 16-year-old girl away from Mar-a-Lago and told him to knock it off, and then said that Jeffrey Epstein was great. That's the best case scenario.
Right. What do you think then about the prospect of Ghislaine Maxwell speaking with the House Oversight Committee? Because they voted to force that deposition, so that's going to happen on August 11th. But Todd Blanche already met with her. They had a 2-day meeting. Look, the Trump administration has been dragging its feet on everything related to Epstein. They got Trump's pet, Mike Johnson, to literally kick Congress out of session so that we didn't have to have this thing come to a head. But they knew that that the House Oversight Committee had voted this motion out of the Oversight Committee to compel the release of the files and to compel deposition from Ghislaine Maxwell. And so even though they've been dragging their feet on everything, they did find time to get Todd Blanche down to that Florida prison immediately so that he could talk to her. So how much of what we find out from Ghislaine Maxwell when we see that deposition do you put any stock in?
Well, it may not happen now, because now that she's met with Todd Blanche, her lawyers are saying she doesn't want to testify before Congress unless she gets full immunity.
Yeah.
And now Congress, the Republicans in the House Oversight Committee, are saying, well, no full immunity. And so, who knows whether it's going to happen or not, but you could imagine a scenario where she talks to Todd Blanche and he's like, well, don't go testify before Congress if you can avoid it.
Right.
So I don't know if we're going to hear from her or not. And if we do hear from her, what is she going to share? What's she not going to share?
Right.
She was granted partial immunity, we know now, by Todd Blanche. For what?
Well, the way I think about and this is, I always feel myself sounding conspiratorial, but if you're Todd Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell, and you've already promised her a pardon, let's say, which Trump has shown to be fully willing to abuse, I would also want to just say, be transparent about what I did offer so that nobody would think that I was hiding anything else. And look, the immunity stuff while he's talking to her, like what do they call it, queen for a day, or just this partial temporary immunity, that is bad enough. It's inappropriate enough for an accused pedophile and sex trafficker, bad enough on its own that if we saw that, we would say, wow, that's really shitty. They must be revealing it. They must be telling the truth, because otherwise, why would they even say it? But it's so that they can say, look, we're being fully transparent. Even this thing that's pretty shitty, we're letting you know. But I would guess that it's so that if there was a pardon offered, we would think we've already gotten full transparency on the immunity thing.
I think his plan going in there was probably to just first find out what she knows and what she could say.
Yeah.
And he also then has to figure out if he's playing games here, he has to figure out, okay, what she said. If she decides to say, okay, I won't say anything about Trump in exchange for a pardon, he's also got to make sure that what she knows isn't memorialized anywhere else, and that no one else can say that, because then they're in even bigger trouble.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is the risk of, if he does give her a pardon, first of all, it wouldn't happen until January 19th, 2029.
Right.
But the reality is, like, if that was promised, the damage is already done, and we wouldn't know for years still. And what she emits when she's speaking with Congress will be just as important as what she actually says.
I will say this, though. Donald Trump gives Ghislaine Maxwell a pardon. I do not think that is going to solve his problems with his base.
Yeah.
Because people thought that they were voting for Trump so he could release the Epstein files, and instead he released his co-conspirator.
But will it matter if it happens in January of 2029, the day before he leaves office?
You know, I don't even know that he'll wait that long. I guess he could wait that long.
Yeah.
But he could also say,
I certainly wouldn't want to see that news cycle.
And if he waits that long, then people are going to be like, well, what's going on with Ghislaine Maxwell?
Yeah.
Why don't we know more? What's going on with the Epstein files? So he really is. I don't know. I think he's a little stuck.
Not to get too meta on this, but this has been a topic of conversation for almost a month now, which is an extraordinary amount of time for anything, unless you're a Republican talking about Hunter Biden, then you have an insatiable appetite for this. But I'm curious what you think the potency of something like this is as more and more time goes on, and obviously other issues are coming into the zeitgeist. How could we miss this Sydney Sweeney scandal that's enveloping this country?
I certainly didn't.
But how are you thinking about this in terms of keeping it in the zeitgeist and continuing to talk about it?
I think this is part of a larger story about Donald Trump, that he, so far, in his 6 months in office, has spent a lot of time protecting and helping fellow elites, and not a lot of time doing what he promised people he would do, which is lower their costs.
Yeah.
And so if you look at Donald Trump over the last 6 months, we're paying $1 billion for him to retrofit a jet from Qatar that he gets to take with him as a keepsake. Today he announced that he's building $200 million ballroom in the White House because he thinks.
Is that not what he promised the voters in Michigan?
Because he likes a ballroom. He's making money hand over fist from crypto. He was yelling at Josh Hawley because of Josh Hawley was trying to work with Democrats to pass a ban on stock trading by members of Congress and the vice president and the president. And Trump thought that he was gonna force him to sell off Mar-a-Lago because it's going to require people to divest of their assets if they're in office, even though they carved out an exception to make sure it doesn't apply to Trump. The Republicans did.
Yeah.
So he's doing great. He's protecting his friends. He's helping his friends. And everyone else who was hoping that there'd be lower prices, the tariff rates just went out, and we're all going to be paying more money for all the shit we buy from overseas.
Yeah.
Permanently. 15 to 50% tax on shit.
Yeah, which by the way, they're still bizarrely framing as some win. I mean, when they announce a 15% tariff on the EU, that is a consumption tax on Americans. That means we pay 15%. I don't know how these people continue to frame it as a win when they're just showing us how much money they are taxing Americans that on a tax that did not exist before. But I think you're exactly right. This is a small part of a larger whole. Donald Trump has promised his supporters in his first term that he was going to usher in some manufacturing renaissance that never materialized, and a jobs boom that never materialized, and an infrastructure law and a healthcare plan that was more comprehensive and more affordable. None of that happened. All he did was spend his political capital on tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. Did the same thing this term. Promised his supporters that he felt their pain on grocery prices, that bizarre term, groceries, on eggs, on rent, on housing. And what did he do when he got into office besides start a trade war that sent the prices of all of those things fucking up? He also passed another tax cut for millionaires and billionaires, rendered his tax cut permanent for those same people. So he will say whatever he needs to say on the campaign trail, including that he's going to be the guy that's going to go after this deep state cabal of people who are completely unaccountable, to live on a second tier of justice that allows them to commit these crimes with impunity. And far from doing that, far from exposing these people, he's entrenching the very system he promised to take down. Yeah. Because these are the people that he's looking to help, not the people he's looking to expose.
No, he cares about himself, and maybe he cares about people around him only to the extent that they can help him.
Right, right. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about Kamala Harris's decision not to run for governor of California. I think that we're probably both in agreement, without even having spoken about this before, that means that she likely wants to run for president of the United States. Curious about your thoughts on that?
No, I don't.
No,
I don't
okay.
think. I think that this might be it for her.
Really?
I do, but I don't know. I mean, the presidency is possible for sure, but I was not surprised by her decision on governor. For this reason, being here in Los Angeles in California, we've really been in the mix in the last 6 months in the national news.
Yeah.
We've been in Trump's sights on a lot of things, and there were a lot of opportunities Kamala Harris had to speak out, and she definitely put out statements and stuff like that. But having seen her sort of stay out of the limelight in these last months, it made me think that she just didn't really want to run for governor, which is totally her right. Because I think if she wanted to run for governor, I even think if she wants to run for president, you're out there, you're talking, you're fighting, you're doing all this stuff. And obviously she was writing a book during this time, and after an election like that, you get a lot of time to just chill out, right? But it seemed to me that the lack of appearances, or the minimal appearances, meant that her heart was not in the race, at least the governor's race, because that's 2026. I'm going to be interested to see when she does this book tour. She's got a book coming out. That's in September. She's on Colbert. How she talks about the book and how she talks about everything that happened. Because if it's backward looking, if it's what she learned, stuff like that, then I feel like maybe she doesn't want to run again. If she jumps right in and starts talking about Donald Trump and 2020 and all this kind of stuff, then maybe. But I do think that everyone else who might run in 2028 has been out there a lot.
Yeah, but I got a different read of it, and I thought that the reason that she was, and I still think the reason that she's staying out of the spotlight right now is to kind of keep her powder dry and not let herself get overexposed in the same way that a lot of politicians do, thinking that, look, Barack Obama doesn't speak often, and when he does, it's a big deal, and it usually gets quite a bit of coverage. And so I think that I think that she may be trying to go that avenue where, okay, I'm only going to make a few comments, and when I do, it'll be big and splashy, as opposed to getting too overexposed in this media environment, and that'll kind of give her, I don't know, a feeling of gravitas when she does speak, that everybody listens.
I think, and this goes for everyone, in Democratic politics, I don't think there's such a thing as overexposure anymore. I think that after, for better or for worse, mostly worse, after Donald Trump's first term, American people have come to expect that their leaders and their presidents and other people who represent them are going to talk all the time and communicate to them all the time. Yeah. And it's an expectation we have, partly because of the information environment we're in. We're on our feeds all the time. And so if someone's not in our face, we forget about them. And yes, that's right about Obama. Obama's also not running for anything anymore.
Right.
And I would argue that I think Obama could talk more and it wouldn't make his voice less powerful. I think he could be out there more if he wanted. But again, he's not running. And I do think for all the candidates who might run in 2028, I think the expectation in today's information environment is that in this political crisis that we're in right now, in this emergency that we're in with Trump, that you're going to be out there and you're going to be fighting and talking. And I don't think it's too late for her to do that if she wants to run in 2028. I started thinking it was too late for governor, but I don't think it's too late for 2028. But I do think if she wants to run in 2028, just like everyone else. And look, this goes for I haven't seen Josh Shapiro out there a lot, and he's probably going to run in 2028. And then there are people like Newsom and Pritzker and other folks who are out there a lot.
Pete. And
Pete, and they're out there a lot right now. And I think, and that may have been the right strategy years ago to keep your powder dry. I think in this environment, you got to be out there as much as possible.
Okay, and finally, let's finish off with this. As we are looking at kind of the evolution of the Democratic Party, we just spoke about, who this, next slate of 2028 candidates might be. Although we'll talk more about the horse race stuff as we get closer to it. A bit of a sea change that we're seeing in the Democratic Party is there was the Bernie Sanders amendment to block the sale of weapons to Israel, and we had a record number of Democrats vote in favor of it. Ultimately, the amendment failed, but I'm curious how you think that this issue is impacting the Democratic Party moving forward, given what we saw out of the Senate.
So Gallup had new polling this week. 32% of Americans support Israeli military action in Gaza right now. That's the lowest it's ever been. That was a 10-point drop from just last September. And when you break that down by party, only 8% of Democrats support Israeli military action. And Netanyahu is at his worst approval that's ever been recorded by Gallup in that poll as well. And I think that the reason that so many Democrats and so many Americans have turned against this is because of the images that we're all seeing on our TV.
Yeah.
I think that just based on what's actually happening there, there were 500, 600 aid trucks coming into Gaza before the ceasefire was broken in late May. And then they instituted a blockade for all food and aid. And they set up 4 sites in the whole for 2 million people so people could get food. Over 1,000 people have been shot trying to get food. It's very difficult to go and get food when there's only 4 sites and there's basically no food allowed in, except for this GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. So people are starving. 2 million people right now are on the brink of starvation. And when you see that and you think, okay, well, yes, Hamas should, of course, release the hostages. Hamas is at fault for the horrific massacre on October 7th. Israel has a right to retaliate, to try to eliminate Hamas, for sure. But how many more kids are going to die? How many more kids have to die before we say, okay, this is a country where our tax dollars are funding Netanyahu's military campaign. They are so we are sending them bombs and guns, but and according to the Geneva Convention, if you are at war and you are the country that is occupying a place that you fought in a war, you are responsible for feeding and caring for that population. That is and Israel is a signatory to the Geneva Conventions. They're not doing that. Okay? And they can say it's not happening. People are starving. And that's real.
Yeah.
And so I think Americans are seeing that. I think Democrats are seeing that. I think the Democratic senators who voted that way saw it. There's 27 senators voted with Bernie, and Slotkin was on Colbert, so she couldn't vote, but she just released a statement saying that she would have voted to block it as well. These are senior establishment Democrats, moderate Democrats who've been very strong supporters of Israel for a long, long time. So this is not like lefties. And I just think it's because of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, watching all of that unfold is beyond. I mean, it's one of the most horrific things that I've ever seen, and I think the most egregious part of this is watching Benjamin Netanyahu come forward and just in a very Trumpian way start to suggest that all of the things that we're seeing with our own eyes are not happening, that they're not blocking any of the food, that there's no starvation. I mean, there was a point where he said that they're not starving, that there's no starvation happening. How do you square those two things? How do you look at the images that you're seeing that are just sweeping across the internet, sweeping across television as well, and square the fact that what he says is not happening is very clearly happening?
I mean, I've never seen sort of denial of reality in this severe.
Right.
I mean, the thing that will stick with me forever is, the New York Times ran this picture of a mother holding her 18-month-old who is, just looks starving.
Yeah.
Ribs protruding, horrifying.
I didn't think it was real when I saw it.
And a bunch of people said, well, they have neglected to mention in the article that the kid was born with a pre-existing condition that made him look like this. But that doesn't mean he isn't also being starved.
Yeah.
Right? So they got a correction in the New York Times for this, right?
Yeah.
That the kid was born with a pre-existing condition. But then the reporting that says the kid is still starving
right.
is upheld.
Yeah.
And no one is challenging that reporting.
Right.
And I'm like, so your gotcha on this is that, hey, it wasn't just a picture of a starving kid, it was a picture of a starving disabled kid?
Right.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, so it's sad to me. It's infuriating too that like people can't just see that like maybe your pre-existing notions of what's going on, maybe they might be wrong. Maybe just like let a little doubt into your thoughts on what's happening in Israel. Even if you've been a strong supporter of Israel, it's okay. Yeah. But like just let that doubt creep in.
Yeah, and I think one thing that really upsets me about all of this is the way where it's so unapologetically to the benefit of Bibi to continue perpetuating this crisis so that nobody else is focusing on any of his other legal issues. When in reality, I mean, look, as an American Jew, Jews have obviously always faced some degree of anti-Semitism and discrimination, but like, if Bibi thinks that this is helping the Jewish cause by doing what he's doing, and taking a hard line against all this stuff and perpetuating the starvation of these kids, like, all it's doing is, if you want to talk about eliminating the goodwill that the world had for Israel after October 7th, that is baked into the cake to the nth degree. But he's making it so that any Jew around the world to have to defend this. I mean, the reality is, unfortunate though it may be, is that what happens in Israel in some kind of tangential way reflects on Jews across the world. And when we see that doesn't help the Jewish cause. It explodes anti-Semitism across the world. And so, like, you think that you're doing something good by taking a hard line in terms of what's happening in Gaza, when in reality, I mean, you've eviscerated any goodwill that the world had for Israel. And we've seen now that France has announced that it will recognize statehood for Palestine. Canada will do the same thing. And so what is the benefit here? And I mean, I'm asking this, we'll finish with this question, but like, what is the benefit here as far as Benjamin Netanyahu is concerned, aside from offering up some distraction to benefit Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, even if you take the view that Israel's actions here should be helping Israel, it's still, by that standard, it is still a failure. Because there are kids, there were people who were just kids when October 7th happened now, who are now in the IDF, who are fighting and dying, right? There's Israeli soldiers that are still dying. The thinking from Netanyahu was, if we do this blockade, it'll squeeze Hamas, and Hamas will release the hostages. There's one hostage that has been released since the blockade of food in late May, and that was due to it's an Israeli American, and that was due to a side deal between the Hamas and the Trump administration. So Bibi has not negotiated the release of any hostages since then. Hamas is still, I think they've said like 25% of Hamas has been destroyed, and so they're still in the tunnels. He has not achieved that objective. So he hasn't eliminated Hamas. He hasn't released the hostages, and the IDF Israeli soldiers are still fighting and dying, and 2 million people are on the brink of starvation, and 60,000 plus have died, and hundreds of thousands are wounded.
Israel's reputation is in tatters.
And so it's like, I don't know how this has helped Israel in any way.
Yeah. How much of a sea change do you think that this is going to usher in? You had mentioned that even these pro-Israel Democrats are starting to vote for this stuff. How much of a sea change do you think that this will kind of usher in as we look ahead? I mean, this is unless Bibi relents, this is only going to get worse. It can only get worse. Nothing gets better as people continue to starve. And so, as you look forward into the Democratic caucus in the Senate and in the House, how do you think this is going to change things?
Yeah, I mean, it very much, I think, depends on what happens with the war, right? And so we don't know how the war is going to go, when's it going to end, if it's going to end, how much more damage it's going to be caused. But I will say, if Bibi Netanyahu is in power and this thing is continuing, then I think in 26 and 28, I think you're going to see more Democrats say enough is enough. Just because Israel is an ally and a close ally, they have a right-wing government with led by a corrupt individual, Bibi Netanyahu, some much worse ministers in the government, and continuing to use U.S. tax dollars to fund this military campaign that is killing people, starving people. Like, I think you're going to have more Democrats say, like, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to condition aid, or we're going to vote to block weapon sales like they did. So
that's the moral argument. I want to ask one last political question here, and that is that, for a long time, Jews have been a larger base of support for Democrats than even evangelicals have been for Republicans. I can't remember if it was the Pew polling from 2022 that said something like 78% of Jews voted for Democrats, which was a higher number than even evangelicals who had voted for Republicans. So this is the base of support. There are going to be a lot of American Jews for whom their allegiance to Israel is important enough that, notwithstanding what's happening, they're still going to try to find a home in a political party that supports Israel. And so Could this be an instance where Republicans want this sea change to happen, politically speaking, so that they can say, hey, there's a big swath of American Jews out there who used to identify as Democrats. Now, because they see Democrats erring on the side of solving what's happening in Gaza, now there's political upside for us because these people are now gettable. How do you think about that?
I think when you get to approval of what Israel's doing down to 8% among Democrats, that is not just the Jewish population.
Right.
In fact,
Right.
I think if you did a cross section of who that 8% is, it's probably people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
And so I don't. And on the Republican side, you're already seeing sort of a split there,
Right. Yeah.
where a lot of the younger MAGA types. And, everyone from Marjorie Taylor Greene to Steve Bannon to Tucker Carlson, all these people.
To Theo Von.
Yeah, right. They are all very, they are starting to oppose what Israel is doing.
And so you have, the Dan Pfeiffer school of talk about issues that unite your party and divide the other party. And in fact, this falls pretty neatly into that bucket. If you have only 8% of Democrats who are supportive of what's going on, and you see splintering on the other side, then this is an issue that actually won't redound to the Republicans' benefit. Politically speaking, it's actually more advantageous on the left.
Yes, but I do think, and I think back to the debate around Iraq, and it is always tempting to figure out where you're going to stand on these issues based on at least partially public opinion.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, this is about war and peace. This is life and death, and you've got to decide as you're seeing these images unfold, as you know the facts on the ground, with all the information you have. I think if you're an elected official, you've got to decide how you feel about this, and if you feel a way about it that is different than your constituents, you've got to do the best job you can explaining why you feel that a different way. But I think it never. Ask all the Democrats who voted for the authorization to fight in Iraq how they feel about voting for that authorization now.
Right.
Looking back on it, because at the time, if you didn't vote for it, you were with the terrorists or you were weak, and you were. So I think that it is important to do what you believe is right, as always, but especially when it comes to issues of war and peace.
Yeah. Well, highly recommend for everybody who's watching right now, if you are not yet subscribed to Pod Save America's YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe. I'm going to put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description. If you're listening on the podcast, I'll put it in the show notes. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe, but it's very important to help build up this progressive media ecosystem so that when somebody new comes online and is looking for content, they're not automatically sorted into right-wing content. And as we know, right-wingers have a much bigger advantage than the left does in terms of getting their content out there. If you go online, you start scrolling, eventually you will fall into a right-wing rabbit hole. So we're trying to push back against that. So again, I'm going to put that link on the screen and also in the post description. Favs, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brian.